Good afternoon. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Education. We will first, and welcome to all of you that are here present. It's nice to be able to say that in Carson City or online or by phone, which we also, we like that when you participate, regardless of how you do that. So welcome. So first of all, would the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Brenda Pearson. Here. Senator Hardy. Here. Senator Hammond. Here. Senator Lang. Here. Senator Buck. Here. Senator Dunyate. Here. Chair Dennis.
Here. Thank you. Everyone's here. We have a quorum, and just for a few housekeeping items, just make sure, even when we ask a question, I don't know if they were able to get it adjusted. So when you ask a question, if you'll turn your mic off. We were getting a little bit of feedback the other day when we were talking to somebody online. So just turn it on and off as you ask questions. And then also for all individuals present in our meeting room, please always keep your face coverings on and maintain social distancing. Our committee information is available on Nellis and which can be accessed through our legislature's website. You may also watch our meetings through Nellis or through the legislature's YouTube channel. Those wishing to provide public testimony or public comment must register to participate through Nellis and select their preferred method. If you register to make your comments by phone, you will receive an email confirmation with call-in information. You can also still submit written comments as outlined in the agenda. And there's help available in Nellis on the help page link at the top of every banner. And then just identify yourself when you are speaking. Make sure you always identify yourself as it goes back and forth so that we know who's saying what. And then state and spell your name and affiliation at the beginning so that we get that. And we're going to take public comment at the end of the meeting, and I'll limit that to 2 minutes per person. And it's okay to say ditto if the person ahead of you said what you were going to say. And you can give your partial comments and submit your full comments in writing if you wish. And I think that's it for that. Today is a special day. We have with us today NSCA, who has many educators here throughout the day and also online. And I wanted to take a moment to recognize them. And for those that don't know who NSCA is, that's the Nevada State Education Association. Have been advocating for education for many, many years. Due to the current limited capacity within the building, most are probably outside listening or watching online. Those at the legislature today include teachers, school support professionals, and others. And we do have some NSCA representatives with us in the room with us today. We do enjoy hearing from those schools as they provide valuable feedback and perspective in how policy is translated and implemented within the classroom. And I encourage anyone interested in speaking to do so during our public comment period at the end. But the representative from NSCA, normally I would have it would be the whole room and have you stand, but if you could just stand, I know each one of you represents many, so thank you. Thank you for being with us today, and I know you even have like a rally going later, I think at 5 o'clock, right? And normally we say red for ed, but I noticed in the stuff I got this time it said red for revenue, so both good things. So congratulations. Thank you for being here with us. All right, we are going to move to our first bill. We're just going to follow them in order. We have AB 38, which revises provisions relating to career and technical education and work-based learning. We have Felicia Gonzalez and Craig Statuki from the Department of Education, Nevada Department of Ed, here with us. So I'm going to open the hearing on AB 38. And I see Felicia on Zoom. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Brenda Pearson, and members of the Committee on Education. Deputy Superintendent of Educator Effectiveness, Felicia Gonzalez, for the record, presenting Assembly Bill 38 as reprinted with amendments adopted on April 19, 2021, known as Work-Based Learning and Perkins Alignment by the department. This bill was pre-filed by Governor Sisolak on behalf of the Department of Education, but this bill was truly filed on behalf of our career and technical education partners, especially those in rural districts whose work demands that our students graduate ready to live and work in the communities they grow up in. Section 1 allows a superintendent or designee to appoint to the Advisory Technical Skills Committee, and the advisory committee shall include pupils and parents of pupils enrolled in career and technical education, members of the Governor's Workforce Investment Board or local entities in workforce development, representatives of special populations, and representatives who serve out-of-school youth, homeless children, and youth who are considered at risk, as well as representatives of Indian tribes and tribal organizations and stakeholders as prescribed by state board regulations. Or the superintendent or designee may consult regularly with those listed for eligibility to the advisory committee to carry out the duties of an advisory technical skills committee. Subsection 2 defines the duties of the advisory technical skills committee as follows: provide input on updates to the comprehensive local needs assessment, review instructional supplies, equipment, and operations to determine effectiveness in preparing pupils to enter the workforce, apprenticeships or college, and meet the needs of business and industry in the region, advise school districts on valuable credentials, and provide technical assistance to meet the career and technical education standards as prescribed by the state board, and develop work-based learning experiences. In keeping with the department's legislative priority of alignment, the meetings of an advisory technical skills committee are not subject to Chapter 241 of NRS or open meeting law. Section 2, subsection 1 allows for pupils to apply credits towards high school graduation if the pupil successfully completes the number of hours in a work-based learning program required by State Board of Education regulation. Subsection 2 includes an on-site evaluation of pupils' performance in a work-based learning program. Subsection 3 requires school district board of trustees or governing bodies to designate a work-based learning coordinator to ensure that each business, agency, or organization that will offer employment and supervision of a pupil as part of a work-based learning program is suitable for participation, as well as establish and maintain a list of organizations suitable for work-based learning. Subsection 4 requires work-based learning program approval from the State Board of Education to include a detailed training agreement and training plan to be completed for each pupil participating for credit. Removes the 3 criteria of required number of hours a pupil must complete to qualify credit, as well as completing an assessment prescribed by the state board related to a chosen career pathway or participation leading to a high school diploma. These changes are made in alignment to the federal Perkins 5 Act and create clarity for our school districts. Finally, subsection 6 includes updated reporting requirements to include the number of pupils participating and the types of work-based learning offered. The reprinted bill includes an amendment adopted on April 19th from the Clark County Black Caucus and Ms. Yvette Williams in section 2, subsection 7, that requires reported student data is desegregated by race, ethnicity, and special populations. Thank you, and we are ready for any questions you may have about AB 38.
Okay, any questions? Senator, hold on. Senator Hammond, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I went over the bill. The only question I have is on the work-based section, in the work-based learning section. One of the biggest problems we have, I think, is trying to get some of the students who are younger into some of these programs. When you mentioned the clarity that's in the bill, my curiosity was, does it actually give some more clarity as to how old you can be when you, to be able to go into some of these programs? Are there restrictions? And, is there anything that can help us kind of figure out how old some of these students can then be?
Thank you for the question, Felicia Gonzalez, for the record. Yes, this clarity is provided, it will be provided to all of the work-based learning coordinators across our state. It does remove the requirement that a student has to be enrolled in a career technical education program and must complete an assessment in order to participate in this. As you know, there are many work-based learning types of activities that can be done at different ages. And so this bill actually removes that specific requirement, so that students that are not in a traditional program are no longer required to be in a traditional program and can participate. And yes, it does include that students of multiple ages can participate in industry tours and other activities. But what does remain in place, and this is something between a school district and the industry partner or business, is that age is sometimes restricted by the employers for certain activities.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dunderloop, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gonzalez, could you, I'm sorry, when you were presenting the bill, I thought I heard you say section 6. And I was wondering if you could clarify what section you were in about that time in your reference.
Thank you for the question, Felicia Gonzalez, for the record. It is subsection 6, includes updated, so that is actually my error. It is subsection 7, includes updated reporting requirements. So that is section 2, subsection 7, includes updated reporting requirements to include the number of pupils participating. Once again, I'm going over this, and I'm so sorry. There is no subsection 6.
It's okay. That's why I asked for clarification. It's just fine. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Just so that I can clear the record. So I think what you were just talking about was section 2, subsection 7. Is that correct? Because I'm reading about pupils and the number of pupils and also the special populations in those. Is that what you were referring to?
Felicia Gonzalez, for the record, section 2, subsection 7, correct.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I had the same question. You referred to, I believe, section 6 and section 7, and after I looked, I thought maybe it's section 2, subsection. So we needed to clarify that in case anybody else was trying to follow that. Okay, other questions? Yes, Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at that same verbiage in subsection 7 of section 2. Must be disaggregated on the basis of the following characteristics. So the disaggregated means that it's individualized, or should that be must be aggregated on the basis of the following?
Felicia Gonzalez, for the record. Thank you for the question. The data will be disaggregated. The school districts break down their participation by each of the groups that are outlined in this subsection.
So the purpose will be to not be able to tell who is who, but look at the aggregated data. Is that right?
Felicia Gonzalez for the record. That is to break down the data so that we have a better understanding of where we are as far as the students that are participating in each subgroup. The concern has been traditionally or historically that there are subgroups, and we know that we as a state need to improve in some areas. We need to improve our participation rates in each of these subgroups, and so that is why we are breaking down this data so that we can work individually with school districts to improve the participation.
I'll have to have some instruction offline apparently. Thanks.
Other questions? Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. I know that business partners willing to take on the challenge of increased liability from partaking to these various learning experiences or work-based learning experiences. So how are you going to incentivize businesses to partner more with school districts, charter or networks, and that so that we can truly bring more students into the workforce?
Felicia Gonzalez for the record. The incentivizing of industry partners participating is not built into this bill. It is something that this bill also streamlines how districts can interact with the business and industry and better meet their needs on when and how they can meet. It allows for greater flexibility so that it's not locked into one specific meeting during, for example, at 9 o'clock, et cetera. There's a lot of flexibility on how and when they can engage with industry partners and businesses. The districts do have guidance for identifying and working with businesses to increase those work-based learning opportunities, but this bill does not provide for any additional incentives.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Not seeing any, so let's go to hear testimony in support, opposition, and neutral on the bill. So first we will hear testimony in support. So if we could queue up the first, or first, is anybody in the room that's here to testify in person? If you are, please come forward. We do have one. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis. So nice to see you, and Vice Chair Don Darrell Loop, and the rest of the committee members. It's great to be in the building. For the record, my name is Mary Przinski, and I'm here representing the Nevada Association of School Superintendents, and we're in full support of this bill. We have been supportive of career and technical education throughout our state for many years, and we appreciate those people in business and industry who've helped us bring opportunities to students. This bill is good, and the advisory committee, the expansion of additional people at the advisory committee, we think is a very good move. So anyway, we're in full support, and we thank you for hearing the bill and giving us an opportunity to come forward and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, anyone else in the room wishing to give testimony, come forward. All right, so let's go to online. So if BPS could queue up the first caller in support.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on AB 38, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to testify in support on AB 38, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 498, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Erica Valdrez, ERICAVALDRIZ with the Vegas Chamber, and we are in support of AB 38. We fully recognize the advantages and positive investments of career and technical education. The availability of the CTE program and the guidance of an advisory technical skills committee can play a massive role in a student's understanding of who they are and where they want to go in life. Career and technical education contributes a major share to the overall education system and plays an important role in the social and economic development of our state. In this era of unemployment, technical education can assure one of a job or a source of income in terms of technical skills and provide comfortable living. The Chamber is supportive of the proposed changes in Section 1 relating to the composition of the advisory committees to be more inclusive and proposed requirements in Section 2 for schools that offer a work-based learning program. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for your time. We urge your support for this bill.
Thank you very much. We could cue the next caller.
Once again, if you'd like to testify in support on AB 38, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. So let's now go to anyone wishing to give testimony in opposition. Anyone here in the room? Not seeing any, so if we could queue up first caller. We have any?
If you would like to testify in opposition on AB 38, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Then let's go to anyone wishing to give testimony in neutral. Either here in the room, don't see any. If not, if we could queue up the first caller in neutral.
If you would like to testify in neutral on AB 38, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 023, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Brenda Pearson, BRENDA PEARSON, and I am here representing the Clark County Education Association. CCEA is testifying in neutral on Assembly Bill 38. CCEA supports investing in the Nevada education system to ensure that we have a skilled workforce necessary for a diversified economy. We believe this bill will help streamline the efficiency for work-based learning and will help to ensure that every stakeholder's voice is heard and that every work-based program in K-12 is outcome determinative to either a certification or a credential leading to further education to employment or directly to employment. CCA appreciates the intent of the department to bring this bill forward, but CCA has concerns that this bill is too narrowly tailored in that it assumes that every LEA will apply for Perkins funding. All hands on deck must be on deck to ensure that our existing work-based programs are strengthened, and Nevada creates needed programs to fill current and projected job openings. We must strategically invest our time, money, and efforts to provide every student with opportunities. CCA must emphasize that the path to rebuilding Nevada's economy is economic diversification and workforce development, and to get on that path, we must invest in K-20 through the full implementation of SB 543 to the optimal level. This legislature passed SB 543 last session with the intention to fund the pupil-centered funding plan in the 2021 legislative session. It is now over halfway through the 2021 session, and this legislature has discussed everything except funding SB 543. CCA understands that it takes both the Democrats and the Republicans under the governor's leadership to be able to introduce and pass new revenue. By failing to fund SB 543, we are telling students and families throughout Nevada that last place is good enough. We don't have time to wait for another legislative session to find and pass new revenue. The time for change is now. If this legislature chooses not to, Nevada voters will do so in 2022. CCA appreciates the efforts of this committee and all stakeholders for this bill and supports all efforts that foster integrated learning opportunities that lead to skill and workforce development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller, neutral.
Chair, there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
Okay. So with that, I'll bring it back here. Do we have any final comments, Ms. Gonzalez?
Thank you, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Dondero Loop, and members of this committee. Thank you so much for allowing us the time to present AB 38. And at this time, we have no further comments or information.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will go ahead and close the hearing on AB 38. And we will open the hearing on AB 67, which is revises provisions to education, dealing with relating to suspensions, expulsions, permanent expulsions of pupil from school. And we have Superintendent Joan Ebert and Christy McGill here to do the presentation. So when you're ready, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Dondero Loop, members of Senate Ed Committee. It is a pleasure to serve as the State Superintendent of Public Instruction and to be in this room with all of you here today. So Assembly Bill 168, as you remember from the 2019 session, charted an ambitious vision for restorative practices in Nevada. And this vision aligns with the Nevada Department of Education values of equity, access to quality, and inclusivity. And we're proud to continue to lead this work in our state. 168, in my 30 years of education, was probably one of the hardest bills to implement. And so since its inception, we've been working across the entire state with all of our constituents, with the guidance counselors, with school board trustees, with principals, with our associations, to make sure that as we came forward today, that it was the best that we could bring in. We believe that we are there by working collaboratively. The clarifying language in this bill that we have, I also want to give a huge thank you to LCB legal staff. Mr. Killian has been amazing to work with us on this reprint. So the proposed changes to this law, first, we created definitions for suspension, expulsion, and permanent expulsion in sections 15, 12, and 13, respectively. These make conforming changes to disaggregated data by suspension, expulsion, and permanent expulsion in sections 1 through 3. Section 15 also removes a gap in the definitions for suspensions and expulsions, and this updates state policy in compliance with the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. The proposed changes create unique discipline policies for pupils with disabilities in charter school applications per Section 4, as well as the conforming changes for charter schools and schools for profoundly gifted students in Sections 5 through 8. Section 9 makes conforming changes to eligibility for independent study, and AB 67 overall also clarifies that a designee of a school board can be used in place of the school board in all instances of student-level discipline. Such hearings and proceedings are to be closed to the public, which is in the best interest of our student. This change is consistent with existing laws associated with hearings in school district, with hearings in a school district, and can be found in Section 23. AB 67 also creates consistency for references to student with a disability in Sections 4, 22, and 23. Section 22 clarifies that only suspensions of 3 or more days can be used to determine whether or not a student has a record of habitual disciplinary problems. And Section 23 provides language related to the age of a student in the simplest terms and clarifies that a student removed for more than one semester must seek educational services. The amendments adopted on April 15th, included in the reprint before you, ensure conforming language was made throughout the bill so that proceedings, like hearings, would be closed to the public and that school board may appoint a designee. These edits create consistency with all other revisions in the original draft of AB 67 that permit boards of trustees to authorize designees. Finally, related to a pupil's age, which is in section 24, response to stakeholder requests for clarity regarding permanent expulsion of students younger than 11 years of age, only in extraordinary circumstances. Today with me is also Deputy Gonzalez. Next to me, I have the amazing Christy McGill, and we also have our Director of Inclusive Education, Will Jensen, who is on Zoom, if you have any questions. Thank you for your time, and we stand ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'm not seeing anybody at the moment. Vice Chair Dondarello.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. I guess my question would be more not even specific to the wording in the bill, but the nemesis of the bill. So can you give us some information, like how many kids do we actually permanently expel in, say, a normal school year, not a COVID year? Typically, are they high school kids? Are they, across the board ages? Just a little bit of background.
Christy McGill, Director of the Office of Safe and Respectful Learning. We can get you the exact numbers. Permanent expulsion is very rare, but we can get you those numbers. And really, this is just to make sure that we're reporting it well, so that if students are permanently expelled, we're reporting that. There was some confusion around the definition of expel and permanent expulsion, and that's why the clarification. But it is quite rare, and we can get you those numbers.
That's fine, and don't do a whole bunch of extra work. I was just curious as I was reading through the bill. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Senator Doñate.
Thank you so much, Chair Dennis and Superintendent Joe Ebert. The only request that I would have is if you have the data as well with the request that Vice Chair Dondarello said, perhaps on any demographics as to who the students are that are getting expelled or suspended, that would be helpful as well. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, Senator Lang.
Thank you. When someone is permanently expelled, are they expelled from the school district or that school? And is there communication between the schools, both charter and the school district schools? And I guess there wouldn't be communication to the private schools, but what kind of communication is there?
Thank you for the question, Superintendent Joan Ebert. For the record, when a student is permanently expelled from a school, they attend either a private school or are homeschooled in those instances. Again, we can follow up with additional data. The communication, I would say, communication is something that we're working as an entire system to close the gap on. And in another bill, you'll see students transferring between different venues, right? We want to make sure that that gap is closed and that people have a clear understanding where the students are. So the school counselors work very closely when students transfer between schools. Schools counselors also work with parents to make sure that they understand the opportunities that are made available, because we want the continuation of learning to happen.
Any other questions? Okay, so then let's go to those wishing to speak in support.
I'm sorry, Chair. May I ask one more question?
Yes, Senator Lang.
So just to follow up on that, because now that we have distance education, is distance education an option? For kids that are expelled or permanently expelled or suspended, I guess this word we're using now, suspended or permanently expelled.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you for the question. Senator Lang, in each of those instances, if a student is suspended, there's always been, whether it is a computer now or in the prior, if it was a paper packet, right, decades ago, because continuation of learning, as we just talked to. So when a student is suspended, they're staying within that specific school setting. When they're expelled, they can use distance learning in that instance, and that is for a student that is more than a semester. For the permanently expelled, you have the private school option, you have the homeschool. There are also other entities that do provide learning at a distance, not only nationally, but globally as well. So those are all opportunities that would be made available to students.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to public testimony in support, opposition, and neutral. We will first start out with those. We're going to hear testimony in support of the bill. And we, just as a reminder, we're on Bill 67. If you'll come forward. Anyone wishing to? Yep. So we have folks here, so we'll start here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. Thank you for your words about our lobby day and rally this evening. On AB 67, NSCA believes in the principles of restorative justice, which proactively build healthy relationships and a sense of community to prevent and address conflict and wrongdoing. We're in support of this bill to make important clarifications to Nevada's system of restorative justice. The issue of student discipline continues to be one of the more vexing ones for all educators. During the 2017 session, NSCA worked to improve the progressive student discipline process. Last session, this was replaced with a restorative justice model. Unfortunately, school districts were not provided with the guidance and resources necessary to successfully implement, and student and educator safety has been compromised. Every day, educators make students feel welcome in the classroom and at school sites. Many utilize learning circles, conflict resolution, and mediation to deal with challenges and resolve conflict. However, this work is often independent of broader school culture. It is necessary for there to be proactive district and school-wide plans to implement restorative practice that is seamlessly integrated into the classroom, curriculum, and culture of schools. This also means providing needed trainings to foster an environment where restorative discipline systems can be successful. Restorative practices should extend throughout the school site and should engage all staff to create and maintain a safe physical space, a supportive school climate, an engaging academic environment, and healthy relationships between students, peers, and staff. Meanwhile, NSA always takes a strong stance for the safety of our educators. We look forward to continuing to work with the Department of Education on implementation of successful restorative justice practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Przinski. I'm here representing Nevada Association of School Superintendents. And first, we want to thank the Department of Ed, Superintendent Ebert and her staff. They work tirelessly with our district superintendents and administrators to get the clarification that was needed on AB 168. The definitions on expel, suspension, permanently expel, all those are very important. And the other thing that's very important in this bill is allowing the boards of trustees or their designee to be involved in student-level discipline issues. We learned a lot with AB 168. We learned that we need to be very careful about the effective dates we put on bills because we could have eliminated a lot of problems with this bill had we done more training with people, talked with people, and helped folks actually implement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go to those online wishing to give testimony in support. VPS, if you could bring the first person online.
If you would like to testify in support on AB 67, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 202, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Paige Barnes, Paigebarnes. I'm here today on behalf of the Nevada Association of School Boards, representing all school board members in Nevada. We support AB 67. I would like to thank Superintendent Ebor and the Department of Education for their hard work over the interim to support districts and provide appropriate guidance on restorative justice. We especially appreciate the amendment, which provides flexibility to boards to appoint a designee. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. If we could queue up the next caller in support.
Chair Dennis, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to testimony in opposition. Anyone wishing to give testimony in opposition, please come forward. No one's coming forward here, so if we could queue up the first caller on 9.
If you'd like to testify in opposition on AB 67, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go then to those wishing to give testimony in neutral. Anyone here in the room? Not seeing anyone, so if we could queue up anyone that wishes to give testimony in neutral.
If you would like to testify in neutral on AB 67, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 023, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Dennis. My name is Dr. Brenda Pearson, BRENDA PEARSON, and I am here representing the Clark County Education Association. CCEA is testifying in neutral on AB 67. This bill provides much-needed clarity to ensure restorative practices are implemented. The addition of definitions for expulsion, permanent expulsion, and suspension will pair very nice with the additional requirements prescribed in AB 194 and will help to standardize the approach to restorative justice across all 17 school districts. However, the designation to include pupils with disabilities in student disciplinary procedures may end up negatively impacting students more than intended. This session, the judiciary committees have heard many bills discussing the competency of a minor and whether that competency should be measured similarly to an adult. Much like that quandary, we must ask whether the child with a physical or intellectual disability should be treated similarly to any other student when they are already trying to change the approach to prevent recidivism. The successful implementation of AB 67, AB 194, and preceding student discipline bills must be built upon a strong foundation of restorative practices. Today, there is no such foundation in Clark County, so the movement from traditional behavior management to restorative practices must encompass robust supports, including ongoing training and coaching. In short, a move to restorative practices requires both a change in the behavior of an educator and a student. CCA appreciates the intent of this bill, but we ask that the sponsors look at the significant publication materials on juvenile justice to ensure that these changes are something that will be standardized, unbiased, and easy for our educators to adopt and students to understand. CCA also asks that this committee look to increase funding in this area by optimally funding SB 543. Without funding, implementation of effective restorative practices will not happen. Funding 543 optimally will ensure educators have the tools and training needed to reduce recidivism and address the school-to-prison pipeline. Though we will be able to utilize a percentage of the ESSER funds for implementation of this bill, one-time funds will not support a statewide transition to restorative practices. Fully funding 543 will impact the academic outcomes of our students, as well as the behavioral outcomes. CCA understands that it will take both Democrats and Republicans under the governor's leadership to be able to introduce and pass new revenue needed to fund SB 543, but failing to do so will tell Nevada's families that students that we are not vested in their future. We do not have time to wait for another legislative session to find and pass new revenue to put the restorative practices and futures of our students first. Thank you again to the committee for hearing this bill, and we look forward to continuing the restorative justice conversation as it pertains to education. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Chair, there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
Okay. Is there any questions from the members that may have come up during testimony? I'm not seeing any. Okay. Do you have any closing comments, Superintendent?
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert, for the record. I really appreciate the comments that were made today. We do have a long way to go in supporting all of our educators, our community as a whole, our families, and our children. What I would like to add is that through the ESSER funds as well as the ARP funds, there are millions of dollars going into just that, whether it is expanding social workers that are made available to schools, increasing the support and the professional development for our educators that work so hard every single day, and also working with our children, right, to understand their role in an education system and how to work collaboratively across the board. So thank you very much for hearing this bill today.
Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 67 and open the hearing on AB 257. Establishes provisions governing indoor air quality in public schools. And I know we have Assemblywoman Martinez here with us, as well as some others that are going to present. I don't know if you want to introduce them, but at that point. So I'll turn it over to you whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I will introduce them in my presentation. Where am I at? Okay, so good afternoon, Chair Dennis and members of the Education Committee. For the record, I'm Assemblywoman Susie Martinez, and I represent Assembly District 12, and I'm pleased to present Assembly Bill 257 for your consideration. So AB 257 seeks to address the dangers of poor ventilation and poor indoor air quality in schools. Even before the pandemic, numerous studies have shown that poor indoor air quality in our schools is not just putting the health and the safety of our students and teachers at risk, but it also impacts students' attendance and performance. Studies show that students' performance metrics can increase by as much as 15% simply by ensuring the classrooms are adequately ventilated. I'm so sorry, my computer's messing with me. COVID-19 has heightened these concerns, and studies show that it can be transmitted throughout the air. The Centers of Disease Control expressly recommends I'm so sorry. I'm having issues here with my computer. The Centers of Disease Control expressly recommends that schools assess and improve their ventilation systems in order to reduce the risk of COVID-19 spread. In their ventilation systems in order to reduce the COVID spread. Yet Nevada has no requirements or standards for ensuring this is done correctly. This legislation is going to do three things. It sets forth the steps and standards for schools to assess and improve their ventilation systems. When state or federal funds are allocated for improving school air quality, 2, it gives schools the flexibility to allocate available federal funds from the CARES Act or ARP Act to undertake these steps without mandating that these funds be allocated for that purpose. And it requires, I'm so sorry, I'm having a hard, this is not working. I'm going to read it from here. All right, and it requires the school districts to adopt an addendum to their plans for safe return for in-person instruction, and requires pursuant to the American Rescue Plan Act 2021 that will set forth the district's plan to ensure adequate ventilation and indoor air quality in schools. This addendum will provide the basis for schools to seek additional state, federal, or bonding funds, if needed, to carry out this plan. We have made 2 amendments to this bill passed by the Assembly in order to address concerns raised by Washoe and Clark County School District. The bill, as passed out of the Assembly, created a mandatory program where schools will be required to use federal ESSER funds from the CARES Act and ARP Acts to comply with the program. The proposed amendments would allow schools to choose whether to use their available funds to improve ventilation and indoor air quality in their facilities. If a school does not choose to use available funds for this purpose, And this bill sets forth the steps and actions needed to ensure proper ventilation and safe air quality in schools. When I ran for my district, I made a promise to put education first and to be an advocate for the needs of our teachers and children. This legislation does exactly that. The standards set forth in the bill are essential to providing the health and safety of Nevada's children and teachers, both during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout this entire process, I, along with our stakeholders, have had conversations with the Governor's Office of Energy, the Nevada Department of Education, the Nevada State Education Association, constituents, and any person or organization that was interested in this piece of legislation. Their input and feedback has been critical towards improving this bill. With me today is Andrew Graff, counselor for the Smart Western State Council, and Chris Ruck, Director of Training with National Energy Management Institute. They are both part of the broad stakeholder team that developed some of the national guidelines documented on which this legislation is based. Mr. Graff will provide the brief overview of the specific requirements of this bill, and Mr. Ruck will be available to answer any technical questions that the committee may have. Thank you, and my apologies for that confusion here.
Thank you very much. So you said they're here to answer questions, or they're doing a presentation?
They're just here to answer any questions that we might have, and a presentation.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is, and members of the Education Committee. For the record, my name is Andrew Graff. I represent Smart Western States Council. My clients have been working for several years with national and regional research groups to help identify measures to address the pervasive problem of poor ventilation and indoor air quality in schools, even before the COVID-19 pandemic raised the importance of this issue. For the past decade, study after study has found that most schools contain classrooms that regularly exceed safety levels for carbon dioxide due to poorly functioning ventilation systems. This affects not only student and teacher health and attendance, but it also affects students' abilities to concentrate and think. High CO2 levels reduce the brain's cognitive ability, making it harder for students to perform on tests. Now with COVID, there is the added concern of increasing the risk of virus spread. Studies have also estimated that over 50% of new heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or HVAC systems, and 85% of replacement HVAC systems have performance issues due to poor quality installation. This has been directly tied to the use of installers who do not have adequate training. As a result, schools often assume that they have poorly functioning systems, but when the systems are tested with the CO2 monitor during occupancy, we find that the classrooms are not actually providing adequate ventilation. Maintaining proper ventilation is particularly important because school classrooms are small, enclosed areas with a high number of occupants all breathing the same air. This is not an indictment of Nevada schools. This is also a national problem. A 2020 report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office estimated that 40% of school districts across the nation have HVAC systems which need repair, updating, or replacement. And this bill, AB 257, gives school districts the tools and guidance needed to address this issue. I'd like to briefly explain this bill and the two proposed amendments. AB 257 creates a school ventilation verification and repair program that sets forth requirements for qualified personnel to assess and perform updates to the school's filtration system, ventilation rates, HVAC system, and CO2 monitors to meet or exceed minimum health and safety standards and prepare reports documenting their findings and recommendations, as well as compliance with the program. The bill passed out of the Assembly created a mandatory program where schools would be required to use available funds to comply with AB 257's requirements. But the First Amendment changes Section 6 of the bill to require schools to comply with the AB 257 program only if a school chooses to allocate or is required to allocate state or federal funds to improve ventilation and indoor air quality in their facilities. Schools would thus retain the flexibility to determine how to use available state and federal funds, such as the ESSER funds provided to schools under the CARES Act, CRRSA Act, and ARP Act, while also ensuring that ventilation systems meet or exceed recommended health and safety standards for classrooms if the money is spent for this purpose. The bill further ensures that schools will retain broad flexibility on how they prioritize any expenditures by setting a $200,000 cap on ventilation system repairs, even when this program is invoked. Schools may choose to exceed the cap as needed, but the bill ensures that the schools will retain broad flexibility on how they prioritize any additional expenditures. The Second Amendment fixes a requirement of Section 13.5 that some stakeholders have correctly pointed out was confusing. The provision currently requires a school district's plan for safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services, which is a report that's already required under the federal ARP Act, to include a report on how they complied with the AB257 program. That provision doesn't make sense unless schools are required to complete the AB257 program before preparing that plan. And it creates a conflict with schools that don't have the funds available to complete the AB257 program before the deadline for preparing the plan. Section 13.5 is amended by requiring each school district to adopt an independent addendum to their safe return to in-person instruction plan that will set forth the district's plan for ensuring adequate ventilation and indoor air quality in their schools. The addendum can be prepared either concurrently or after preparation of the plan required under the ARP Act. Compliance with this requirement is not a prerequisite for return to in-person instruction, and the provision doesn't create a new mandate to comply with the plan. Rather, it provides a roadmap for schools to ensure adequate ventilation and indoor air quality in their facilities and can be used as the basis for seeking additional state or federal funds or support a bond measure to carry out their plan if funds are not currently available. We'd like to thank you for your consideration of this important bill. I'm available for any questions, as is Chris Rook, our technical expert. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do we have, and that's it on the presentation, right? Are we at questions now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, Senator Lang.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a really complex bill, and I've read it a couple of times now, and I'm not sure I've gotten the gist of everything in it. But I wanted to ask you in Section 6, where it says to the extent that money is available, then I'm thinking that's saying then we can fix stuff. What really is troubling to me, if the air quality is bad in a building, why we would allow staff and children in that class in the first place. And so to me, I think to the extent that money is available is the wrong word to use. I think that we need to get it fixed. I think, I'm not sure if insurance covers fixing this, that the school district would have or whatever. But I'm also concerned, and you talk about the buildings, I'm also concerned about the portables. Portables have terrible ventilation and we have grown at such a rapid rate. If you drive around in Clark County, you see portables everywhere. And I don't know if you've been in one of those during a hot day or when the air conditioning's gone out or, something else has happened, but it is a horrific situation for both staff and children to be in. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to Section 6, and I'll probably have something later as other people ask questions.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, so Section 6 has actually been proposed amendments in the exhibits that were provided today, and it goes on to further define that phrase to extent the money is available to say that money is considered available when a school board of trustees of the school district or governing body receives or accepts federal funds and allocates or is required to allocate funding to improve ventilation. And then if they do choose to improve it, then they need to follow the steps of the program of AB257 requirements, which is two-part, which it requires an assessment of their filtration, ventilation, HVAC system, and CO2 monitors, and then requires a report to be prepared to say what steps need to be done in order to cure those problems, and then but up to the $200,000 cap.
So, Chair, if I may follow up. So my problem, though, is I go back to, I think, what I said in the beginning, and it's, even though it says to the extent available and you have the amended language, it still appears to me to be a choice. a choice that if the school board decides or the school decides it's important. I mean, I'm a member of the public too, and I think it's important that we fix the schools and we get them up to the standard where it's healthy both for the students and the children and staff to be there. So I would just think that that language might be strengthened a little bit more.
Thank you for your comment. And we agree.
Okay. All right, let's go, next question, Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. This bill seems very prescriptive, and it seems like common sense for district leaders to be, monitoring classroom air quality. Does this prioritize the use of ESSER funds for this HVAC report over supplemental education spending?
It allows school districts to choose whether or not to
Don't
use
forget
the
to
ESSER
identify
funds.
yourself
It
first.
doesn't require. Oh, sorry, for the record, Andrew Graff. It doesn't require schools to use ESSER funds with this amendment. Schools can choose to use those funds for this purpose. And if they do choose to use the funds, then they need to follow the holistic program of AB 257's requirements.
Are you good, Senator Buck? Are you okay? Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of agree with my colleague here to my left, Senator Buck, when she's talking about being too prescriptive. It seems like the requirements in this bill go above and beyond even what the CDC recommendations are, and then it takes sort of the flexibility away from the schools or the school districts to then decide where to put some of the other money later on. What's wrong with just looking at the CDC requirements and then allowing the flexibility of school districts to accomplish that, get it done, get that, as long as they're actually accomplishing what are the guidelines in the CDC reports that we keep getting.
The guidelines that this is Andrew Graff for the record. The guidelines that are in AB 257 requirements are consistent with CDC guidelines that are current as of today.
Okay, I'll check that again because I thought it actually went above and beyond that. So I appreciate it. I'll take a look at that and compare it again.
And just so I'm clear, the amendment that was that's being proposed is taking away a mandate for a school district to do this. Is that correct?
Andrew Graff for the record. Yes, that is correct.
And unless they're getting specific money for air quality, and then they have to use it for that, correct?
Yes, Andrew Graff for the record. It leaves the door open. So if the state or any future federal bills do require schools to implement indoor air or use funds for indoor air quality or ventilation systems, that they have to comply with this program's requirements.
And it also provides that the schools can choose to do this whether they want to do this, right?
Andrew Graff for the record. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. I was wondering if you have been working in collaboration with school districts to find out if there is in our Nevada school districts, not in outside school districts, if there is HVAC reports being conducted by these school districts currently.
Andrew Graff for the record. It's my understanding some have, but most have not. And that's what this program would do is have the schools create these reports so that they can understand what their needs are in terms of improving their ventilation systems and filtration systems, and then provide them guidance on what needs to be done in order to ensure that the classrooms are safe and healthy indoor air quality environments.
Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the lines of the funds for the air quality, are these funds that we aren't sure where they are or what they do, are these funds only to be used for air quality, or are these funds that come to the school district give an option for them to be used for other things besides air quality, or whatever? Are these funds specific for air quality that may or may not come, or are they tied to something else that could be used for something else?
Andrew Graff for the record. So school districts currently have access to a lot of the federal stimulus funding that has come out through the CARES Act, the CRRSA Act, and the recently enacted American Rescue Plan Act as well, in the form of the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, or ESSER funds. And the ESSER funds specify that school districts can use these funds across a broad array of uses, including improving indoor air quality. So they do have funds available to use those, but they're not required to use those funds for this program. However, if they choose to use the funds for this program, then they would need to comply with the terms of the program in order to perform the assessments and any additional maintenance, repairs, or upgrades that are identified consistent with the prescriptive requirements of the Act. And then any future FNOA funds, whether those be used for this purpose or required to be used for this purpose, would also need to comply with the terms of this program.
All right. Senator Don Darrell Loop.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. I'm sorry, could you confirm, have you worked with the school districts in Nevada specifically, and not just the large ones, but have you worked with the school districts with the nemesis of the bill and the information in the bill and the amendment?
Andrew Graff for the record. Yes, we've been working with the school districts on this bill to engage with them and what the bill requires and how they can meet the requirements and the extent that they can use their funding for implementing the prescriptive requirements of the bill in order to get improved indoor air quality in their school classrooms.
Thank you very much. I just wasn't sure that you had said that. Thank you.
Senator Lang.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. So when the school districts do these reports, will these reports be made public, and will they be presentation to the school board? How will we find out what's happening? Do you know?
Andrew Graff for the record. Thank you for your question. Yes, the school districts will, once they've done the assessment and done a verification report after the plan saying what assessments they have done, what the necessary repairs are needed to do, they will have a report that's given to the Office of Energy and will be made publicly available so that any interested members of the public can access these reports. And in addition, they will be required to make publicly available their addendum to the safe return plan that's required as part of receiving ESSER funds, which will also have another way of showing what their intended plan is for ensuring adequate ventilation and improvements to indoor air quality in their schools.
Chair Dennis, if I could just do a little follow-up.
Go ahead.
So I just want to go back to the portable thing because we talk about school buildings and the portables are separate. So I just want to make sure the portables are included in on these tests that are going to happen if the bill passes.
This is Andrew Graff. The portables are not included in this bill. It requires that they attest their HVAC systems, their ventilation systems, and filtration rates and CO2 monitors, and then upgrade those systems. So it's really highlighting what needs to be done in terms of improving the HVAC so that they don't need to rely on the portable systems for ventilation in their schools.
I'm sorry, I think you misunderstood what I was asking. The portable buildings that are away from the school buildings per se, I just want to make sure that they're included in on the testing.
Andrew Graff for the record. Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, they will be included in the testing.
Senator Hardy, I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you,
And then Senator
Mr.
Ignazzi.
Chair. So I'm curious because, we have this thing called sick building syndrome. Have we actually shown these, I'll call them fortress schools, no windows, no doors, no open to the outside. Have we seen that kind of thing in versus the old style buildings, or has somebody done studies to look at this already to say out of 100 schools we have 10 that have a problem with ventilation? Are we flying blind here, or do we have some experience where we're going? Do the newer schools who have been built in the last 5 years, for instance, have they already taken this into account? Have they already done things in their HVAC system that have prevented this? Are we looking at new schools, old schools, sick building syndromes? What experience do we have? Thank you.
This is Andrew Graff. Thank you for your question. That's one of the major things that this bill seeks to address, is that we do not have a lot of the information that we need in order to make an understanding of what the status of our school HVAC systems are. And so by requiring these assessments and doing it in a prescriptive manner, we'll have a better understanding of what needs to be done throughout the school districts and how to improve it, and then doing the actual work in order to make those improvements to ensure it's indoor air quality is improved.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So we have newer schools. They have criteria which they're built, which includes all of this, I would hope, in the building of the school. So do we not include that in the planning of the schools, is to have a ventilation program that actually works? I mean, if we don't have that already in place, I would be surprised. Are you saying that we haven't, and we're flying blind in the last schools that have been built in the last 2 years, 1 year, 5 years?
This is Christopher Rook with the National Energy Management Institute, for the record. To the chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. To answer that question, I come to you from a unique perspective of that I was a first grade teacher that ended up being someone that works on the units on the roofs. Specifically for that would be is that if you're looking at classrooms that were recently built or buildings that were recently built, I would look to the 2019 study done by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and UC Davis. They found that looking at schools that had brand new units, highly efficient units installed within the last 3 years, within the last 3 years, only 15% of those, when tested, were actually meeting the adequate minimum ventilation rate. So to your question, yes, there is in the Uniform Mechanical Code, there is clarification there of that how you're going to set up the system. What we find and what that study found, though, was that the reason that these units didn't was because either the technicians that were installing them were not properly trained, or even more commonly, the units were not properly maintained. So even though these units were brand new, they were still having problems. In regards to your questions about different types of buildings, you find this in various studies from throughout the country. Even a 2003 report that looked at the difference between portable units and permanent classrooms, going back to the other question, found that 50% of them didn't have adequate ventilation, regardless if they were new or old. Lastly, you brought up sick building syndrome. What you find when you get into indoor air quality is that 80% of indoor air quality issues get addressed simply by having the minimum adequate ventilation rate, 80%. The other 20% are severely reduced. Overall, though, the point is that we do see a ventilation problem widespread, and we do know that ventilation has significant impacts of positive impacts when it's just even set to the minimum amount.
Okay, thank you. Senator Oñate.
Thank you so much, Chair Dennis. It's interesting because exactly to the point that you brought up, I went to old schools that had broken ACs, and I went to a new school that had a broken AC. So it's a very common experience to go through, and, we haven't even we're talking about school buildings right now. We haven't even talked about school buses, which is an even bigger problem in terms of making sure that students have good, safe environments. But, I want to ask you a question. Can you walk me through some of the processes to notify parents or community members, for instance, if an AC is not working, or if we find out that through an environmental analysis that, the indoor air quality within the school is not safe? for the students attending. Has that been addressed? Is that something that can be worked with the Southern Nevada Health District in CCSD's way, or perhaps in other parts of the state? Like, what's the public health standpoint of if we document that air quality is unsafe for students, like what happens beyond that? Has that been a conversation?
Chris Rook, National Energy Management Institute. Let me give you the pre-part to that question, and then I'll turn it over to Andrew for the final part. I think the biggest thing here and the benefit of doing a ventilation assessment is that you understand that you have those problems. One of the problems that you have with airflow is that you many times don't realize that you have a problem. And when you look at that study I recommended before, they asked teachers if they thought the air was fine, and 60% of them that were in very poorly ventilated classrooms thought it was okay. So first is recognizing that you have the problem. Then once you have the problem, it's making that problem available and how you're going to go about it. So I'll turn that over to Andrew about what parts of legislation would cover that.
Thank you, Andrew Graff. Yes, so the bill has prescriptive requirements to test and adjust as necessary. And so if the ventilation or filtration or CO2 monitors doesn't meet the minimum standards that are set forth in the bill, those will be documented, and then the school district will need to implement those repairs up to $200,000, and then they can choose to go above and beyond that if they would like to, once they're implementing the program.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. Just one clarification, but from what I read in the bill so far, there is no clarification as to the timeline of how that needs to be delivered and communicated to the public. It just says that exactly what you said, it can be up to $200,000, but it doesn't go beyond that, correct?
Correct. So they would need, you would get two reports, and that's where you would see it. The first would be the assessment report that's prepared by the qualified adjusting or testing personnel that will be provided to mechanical engineer to evaluate whether further additional repairs, adjustments will be necessary. And then a conclusion report, which would be a verification of what has been done and what steps will need to be taken as well for further compliance with the act.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so we're going to go then to testimony in support of the bill. So anyone here in the room, if you'll come forward. So we've got, okay, yeah, you can both come up. There's a. So we'll start here in Carson City, and then we'll go to the online. Go ahead when you're ready.
Chairman Dennis and members of the Senate Education Committee, for the record, my name is Alfonso Lopez, and on behalf of the Sheet Metal Workers and Air Rail Transportation Workers Association, we are here in support of AB 257. During this pandemic, it is even more important that clear air in public buildings, especially in our schools, is there to protect our children and teachers. I also would like to thank the stakeholders that have supported this legislation. Parent to Parent of Southern Nevada, Nevada State Education Association, and numerous support from different labor organizations. In closing, I respectfully encourage this committee to support AB 257 with the conceptual amendment presented today. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. In our history, there have been few more challenging times than the one we find ourselves in right now with the global COVID-19 pandemic. NSEA supports AB 257, addressing one of the most pressing school safety issues, indoor air quality. Educators know distance or hybrid learning models are not ideal for most students or educators. At the same time, educators have also been very concerned about their health and the health and well-being of students during this past school year. We know prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Nevada's neighborhood public schools were already chronically underfunded with the most crowded classrooms in the country. Meanwhile, many of our school facilities are decades old with failing windows and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. As we work to safely return to full in-person learning, it is so important to have strong protocols, not just on social distancing, but also doing everything we can to improve air quality inside our schools. With the advocacy from the National Education Association, support from our federal delegation, significant funds have been made available to operate school buildings more safely over the next several years. This includes funds for facilities, including HVAC systems. Educators understand that for these systems to be working at their best, they need to be maintained by technicians who are trained and certified. Effectively addressing the issue of indoor air quality needs to be a component of the safe return to full in-person learning in every district in the state. And let me just briefly add that it really is a difficult position to talk about the needs of school facilities and the needs to have safe and clean air for those in school facilities to breathe, and the additional education supports that are needed in our schools right now. We need both. We can do this and that. We need to do both. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jamie Tedrinsky. I am a member of NSEA, and I'm also a teacher in the Clark County School District. I wasn't planning on testifying for this, but after hearing some of the conversation, I feel like it's really important for you to hear from a teacher who's actively in these buildings what it's like. And I want to thank Senator Lang for bringing up the portables. I started out in a portable here in Clark County, and my roof was filled with mold to the extent that one day during class, one of the ceiling tiles collapsed and hit a student. And the solution for fixing it was to duct tape a trash bag over the hole and tell me that it didn't rain that often in Las Vegas, so it shouldn't be a problem. But the mold had come from faulty air conditioning, and that had caused the moisture, that caused the mold, that caused the collapse. After I moved into a building at another school, we've had frequent outages of our air conditioning units. And if you are in Las Vegas, you know that until October, it can get up to 115 degrees. And when you're inside with a class of 45 high schoolers, like that temperature just continues to increase. So I'm here speaking as an individual, telling you that this is indeed a very important piece of legislation that should be passed for our students, for our staff members who are in these schools with this ineffective air quality. I have colleagues and students who suffer from asthma, who suffer from other breathing ailments, and it really does truly impact the quality of their life and causes chronic absenteeism in both staff and students. So I see this as not only like an educational issue, but a public health concern. And I want to reiterate what some others have said. In the time with this ongoing pandemic, we know that COVID will likely be around for a while. I think it's really important that we take into consideration that this is more than just a school issue, that this is going to be a societal issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to give testimony in support here? If not, let's go to those online. BPS, if you could queue up the first person in support.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support on AB 257, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 080, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis and members of the Education Committee. My name is Leonardo Benavides, Leonardobenavides, with the Clark County School District, testifying in support of AB 257. At the school district, the quality of air is a priority of importance to us, and more than ever after everything the world has been through over the last year. We appreciate Assemblywoman Martinez bringing forward this bill in order to ensure that this continues to be a priority going forward. We'd like to thank the Assemblywoman and all the stakeholders involved in the formation of AB 257 for working with us and our fellow Nevada school districts to ensure that we have continued flexibility with the federal stimulus dollars coming towards school districts. We're glad that through this cooperative dialogue, we are able to make the language permissive in the proposed amendment you see today to ensure that use of the federal funds remain discretionary in order for districts to address the larger set of issues presented by the pandemic as they see best fits the needs of our students and staff. In addition, the district is fine adding information to our reopening plan, which states if any HVAC projects take place during the timeline specified in the bill using federal funds, we will follow what is outlined in this bill. Once again, I want to thank Assemblywoman Martinez and all the stakeholders, especially Randy Soltero, for working with us and for bringing forth this bill today so we could discuss the importance of air quality in our schools. Thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. If we could queue up the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits, 656, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Will Pregman for the record, W-I-L-L, P as in Peter, R-E-G-M-A-N, with Battleborn Progress. We're in support of AB 257. Nevada students deserve healthy air to breathe at school. With the spread of COVID-19, our society has learned the necessity for good ventilation, air filtration to slow the spread of disease. But for students who already struggle with respiratory ailments such as asthma, AB 257 is a step towards alleviating the impact of such conditions. This bill also has the potential to help our educators and support staff stay safe from the same health impacts as well. We thank Assemblywoman Martinez for bringing this bill forward and encourage you to please pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits, 292, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good afternoon. Rob Benner, R-O-B-B-E-N-N-E-R with the Northern Nevada Building Trades. Carbon dioxide levels in the classroom have direct effects on the health, attendance rate, and learning abilities of our students. Along with the risks of COVID-19, the need for better air quality standards is critical. We strongly support AB 257. Passage of this bill would dramatically improve the health and success of Nevada's teachers and students. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits, 796, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, Rusty McAllister, R-U-S-T-Y-M-C-A-L-L-I-S-T-E-R. I'm the Executive Secretary Treasurer for the Nevada State AFL-CIO, and we also stand in support of Assembly Bill 257. We believe this is a good use of dollars. We believe it helps ensure the safety of our students and of our educators. And for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, and for the reasons that have been stated by the previous speakers, we are in support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the next caller in support.
Caller with the last three digits, 001, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Marie Nices, M-A-R-I-E-N-E-I-S-E-S-S. I am the president of the Clark County Education Association. Good afternoon, Chair Dennis and committee members. CCEA is testifying in support on AB 257. We appreciate the intent of this bill. However, we are incredibly concerned that the cost of the functional ventilation systems will come out of the classroom. CCEA feels that the proposed amendment addresses our concerns by eliminating the mandate for using the ESSER funds for the prescribed HVAC reports, but instead requires a school who chooses to allocate federal funds for air quality to follow the prescriptive process in this bill. CCEA educators care about clean air quality in our classrooms. They care so much that we included air quality in our memorandum of agreement for the return to in-person learning. When our educators felt that the school district did not meet the standards in the agreement, they voiced their concerns with school board trustees. Additionally, the Clark County School District's hybrid implementation guide includes HVAC strategies to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission. However, even with CCSD being halfway through their independent HVAC evaluations, we know that the infrastructure money is scarce. CCA cares about air quality, and to address air quality in education, we must fund our schools optimally. As such, we urge you to find revenue to fund SB 543 optimally and find a source of funding for this bill separate from designated school and emergency COVID relief funds to ensure we put the health and safety of our educators and students first. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to our next caller in support.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Let's go to those that are in opposition. Anybody here in the room? Nobody's coming forward, so let's go to the first, if you queue up the first one online.
If you would like to testify in opposition on AB 257, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Okay, let's go to those that are in neutral. Anyone wishing to give testimony in neutral? No one here in the room. Let's queue up the first caller in online.
If you would like to testify in neutral on AB 257, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Okay. All right. And did any questions come up during that testimony that we need to clarify? Not hearing any. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard allusions made to studies and papers, projects. It'd be great to have that kind of information where we could see it. If somebody's got those documents, thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, we did have a few that referenced some studies and things. If you could submit those for the members so they could look that up. With that, any closing comments? Samuel Martinez, do you guys have any additional closing comments?
I would just like to thank the committee and Senator Dennis for the privilege of your time and your consideration for Assembly Bill 257. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, we will go ahead and close the hearing on AB 257, and we will go to our next item on the agenda, which is public comment. So I'll open up the time for public comment. Please, public comment is limited to 2 minutes per person. So I'll start. If anybody here in the room would like to go, they'd come forward, and then we'll go to those online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Chris Daly, again, Nevada State Education Association. NSEA has been the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years, representing educators across the state, teachers, other licensed education professionals, and education support professionals. As you, Mr. Chair, mentioned, today, April 26th, is our Educator Lobby Day. It's also our Red for Revenue rally here in Carson City. Today, 37 educators have masked up. Perhaps you've seen some red masks or red shirts in the building, and they're meeting with their legislators discussing how education funding and how the new funding plan will impact them and the students that they serve. We think that this may be the largest lobby day so far of this session that's being conducted a little bit differently. In the rankings of the states released by the National Education Association just this week, Nevada continues to rank 48th in per student funding. We also have the largest class sizes in the nation. At 5 o'clock, hundreds of educators will be joining us downstairs from across the state, converging here in the state's capital under the banner of Red for Revenue, calling for Nevada to reach the national average in per student funding by the year 2030. In order to make it there, we're going to need legislators to take bold action now to pass revenue that is in front of you at this point in time, at this legislative session, like AGR 1, that would increase the mining tax and deliver up to $485 million per year for the state, those funds which could be used to lift up Nevada schools and Nevada public education. So we invite you, senators, to join us downstairs. We invite you to take the pledge, and we invite you to continue to work with us and other education stakeholders to address one of the most pressing issues facing the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello again. For the record, my name is Jamie Tedrinsky. I'm a teacher in Clark County School District. So I'm here today to ask you to invest in Nevada and our children by passing AJR 1 and SB 346, which, as you know, will generate a considerable amount of money for Nevada and by increasing the mining tax and taxing the sale of digital products. So by nature, I am a storyteller, and I tell stories through my students. All right, so Chris came with the facts. I kind of come with the anecdotes. Nevada is in a crisis when it comes to education. When I started this school year, I had 3 classes that had 60 students. That's unattainable for me as a teacher. That's not fair to me as an educator. That's not fair to the students. They don't get the time and attention they deserve. I feel like I'm not my best when I have that many students. I have a total of 243 students this year. But other than class sizes and textbooks that still talk about Bill Clinton as an up-and-coming politician, which are still in our district, we also lack a lot of the support professionals that increasing this revenue will provide for the district. We don't have nearly enough school counselors. We don't have enough social workers. We don't have enough school psychologists. With the district, when there is a tragedy, there is not enough time or resource to adequately address that. Unfortunately, where I work in North Las Vegas, we are not new to violence impacting our students and our community. In the 6 years that I've been in Clark County School District, I have lost 4 students to violence, and I have lost 2 more as the perpetrators of violence to the prison system. If we invested more money into our schools, we could invest more into the mental health for our students, not only for those who have been victimized, but for those who are left behind. When we had a student shot on our campus after school a couple of years ago, the district sent us counselors for 1 day, and that was not enough. Our kids were hurting, our staff was hurting, right? And that's so hard to work in an environment where your kids are hurting and you don't have the resources. And when your staff is hurting and they're expected to take up the mantle and help the kids when there's no help for us as well. So I'm here asking you to pass SB 346, not only so we can lower our class sizes and get adequate materials, both textbooks and technology, but also to be able to provide for our students, to give them counselors when they need counseling. Like, we were all 14 at one point. Like, we know how angsty like teenagers are, and that sometimes they just need someone to talk to. And when they don't have that, that just kind of builds up, and that really impacts the school climate in the community. And it's something that needs to be addressed, and something that for far, far too long here in Nevada has not been addressed. My kids deserve so much more than what we're able to offer them right now. I've seen so many kids that have that potential, but that fire begins to die in their eyes because there are so many other things that are impacting them. And I truly, truly believe that increasing this revenue and funneling more money into the schools and allowing us to provide more resources to our students will help reduce that prison to school, like that school to prison pipeline, will help reduce the amount of dropouts that we have, and will also bring back classes that have been cut. I have students who, they came for culinary, they came for auto tech.
I appreciate your passion, but I'm going to have you hurry and finish up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for all you do. All right, let's go. Anyone else wishing to give testimony here? All right, let's go to those that are online. If we could queue up anyone wishing to give public comment online.
If you would like to participate in public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to participate in public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Do we have anyone on that's on? Maybe.
We have no one in the queue at the moment, Chair.
Okay, great. All right. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. We have no further items to come before us today. So thank you, members. We are adjourned.